Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are taking a close look at a really specific ingredient market,
We are indeed.
the global market for Guaifenesin powder. Now, you might not know that name right off the bat,
Hmm.
but if you've ever, grabbed some cough and cold medicine, you've probably used it. It's the expectorant, the stuff that helps clear things out.
That's exactly right. And what's pretty fascinating about this particular market is just the scale of it and, well, its consistent growth.
Yeah.
We're going to unpack the data we've got here from cognitive market research, look at how big it is, where the growth's happening globally, and maybe crucially, why it's happening. Looking ahead to 2033.
Okay, so let's kick off with that big picture. The source material paints quite a scene. We're talking about a pretty substantial global market.
Definitely.
Back in 2021, the value was over $2.1 billion. $2,148.1 million, to be exact.
And it didn't just sit there, did it? It grew. By 2025, that figure climbed to over $2.6 billion, $2,681.4 million.
Okay, so that's, noticeable movement in just those 4 years. And the forecast, the research points to continued strong growth. They're projecting the market to hit over $4.1 billion by 2033. So $4,177.9 million.
So basically, it's on track to nearly double in size between 2021 and 2033.
Wow.
And the report crunches that down to a compound annual growth rate, or CAGR, of 5.7% for that whole period.
Right, 5.7%. And just quickly, for anyone maybe less familiar with these reports, CAGR is like the average yearly growth, but it accounts for compounding effects.
Exactly.
So 5.7% means it's a steady compounding increase year after year on average. That consistency, that upward trend, that's really the main global story here, isn't it?
It is. But, the really interesting stuff often starts when you break those global numbers down by region, by country. That's where you start to see the different dynamics. It's the specific engines driving that overall number.
Right. Let's dive into that then. Let's unpack it region by region, starting with North America.
Yep.
It's a major player, right? A big slice of the global pie. The data says North America was worth about $674.5 million in 2021.
Yep.
And it's expected to grow to over $1.25 billion by 2033. That's a solid CAGR of 5.4%.
And within North America, the U.S. is, well, the biggest single country market. No surprise there.
Right.
It's projected to convert $870 million by 2033. That's up from around $490 million in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So growing at a steady 5% CAGR.
What's kind of interesting, though, is that Canada and Mexico actually show slightly faster growth rates than the U.S., within the region anyway. Canada's forecast for a, quote, strong 6.5% CAGR, growing from about $127 million to nearly $270 million by 2033.
Okay.
And Mexico is not far behind, 6.1% CAGR, projected to more than double from $58 million to over $111 million in that same period.
So, yeah, that suggests that while the U.S. is the established giant, maybe there's higher momentum. Or expanding access or demand, perhaps, in Canada and Mexico.
Could be. Contributing maybe disproportionately to the regional growth rate.
Yeah, possibly. Okay, let's hop across the pond to Europe.
Okay, Europe, another substantial piece. It was around $552 million in 2021 and forecast to reach over $1 billion by 2033. The CAGR there is 5.6%, very close to the global average, actually.
Right, and here you see some varied performance among the big economies. The UK and Germany, they show pretty robust growth rates, actually above that European average.
Okay.
CAGRs of 6.3% for the UK and 6% for Germany. The UK market's expected to more than double by 2033 from its 2021 value. Germany's looking at similar strong expansion.
France is also a big market, but its growth rate is a bit slower. It looks like 5.1%.
Yeah, a little softer.
And then you've got countries like Italy and Spain. They started from smaller bases in 2021, around $67 million and $52 million.
Right.
But they're also on solid growth paths, both getting near or over $100 million by 2033. Spain's EGR is noted at 5.3%.
It's also worth noting that Russia, another significant European market in size, is projected for, slower expansion, about 4.6% CAGR.
Right, compared to Western Europe.
Yeah. And the data also pulls out smaller but still growing markets like Luxembourg, 5.8% CAGR, and the rest of Europe category also growing at 5.8%.
Okay, quite a mix in Europe then. Let's shift over to Asia Pacific. The source specifically calls this region a major growth driver.
And you can definitely see why when you look at the numbers.
Yeah.
The market there goes from about $636 million in 2021 up to nearly $1.3 billion by 2033.
Wow, okay.
growing at a 5.8% CAGR, so just a touch above that global rate.
And China. It's the heavyweight in the region described as the largest market.
Absolutely. It's projected to grow from around $238 million back in 2021 to almost $500 million by 2033. That's a pretty strong 6.1% CAGR.
But India really stands out here. The report calls it a key emerging market, and it has one of the highest growth rates we've seen so far.
That's right.
India is forecast to more than double its market size, from about $111 million in 2021 to nearly $250 million by 2033, an impressive 6.5% CAGR.
Yeah, that 6.5% matches Canada's rate, doesn't it? It really highlights, perhaps, the expanding pharma sector there, maybe increasing access to basic meds.
Definitely something driving that.
Yeah. And even the more, let's say, mature markets in
Yeah.
APAC, like Japan, they still show steady growth,
Mm-hmm.
just at a slower pace, 4.8% CAGR compared to China or India.
Makes sense.
South Korea and Australia are also contributing solid growth, both around 5.5% CAGR. And the collective Southeast Asia region also, quote, shines with a strong 6.1% CAGR. So broad expansion across that area, too.
Okay, so APAC is definitely living up to that growth driver label. What about South America?
Well, Brazil leads the pack there.
Yeah.
Started at about $55 million in 2021, expected to reach over $100 million by 2033. It's a 5.5% CAGR.
Okay. And others in the region.
Other significant markets like Argentina and Colombia, they show pretty similar growth paths, both with KGRs hovering around that 5.5% to 5.6% mark.
Right.
Peru and Chile are going too, though Peru shows a bit slower expansion, noted at 4.6% CAGR. Chile's around 5%.
Got it. Okay, last region then, the Middle East and Africa. Maybe smaller overall value compared to the others.
True, but
But the data points out some of the fastest growing markets are actually here.
exactly. That's a really key takeaway. Look at Egypt, for instance, projected to more than double its market value, from about $25 million in 2021 to $52 million by 2033. That's an impressive 7% CAGR.
7%. Okay.
And Turkey. It actually takes the crown here. It has the highest KGR mentioned in the entire report, a remarkable 7.1%.
Wow, 7.1%.
Its market's forecast to expand from about $16.4 million to over $34.6 million in the same time frame.
That high growth in places like Egypt and Turkey is really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially when you think about the drivers, which we should probably get to.
Absolutely. It hints at, rapidly changing healthcare landscapes, maybe market access improving quickly.
Yeah. What about the rest of the Middle East?
The rest of the Middle East category shows more moderate growth, around a 3% CAGR.
Okay. So we've kind of mapped out this global growth story for Guaifenesin powder. We're seeing pretty significant expansion projected almost everywhere, particular hotspots, like you said, in parts of Asia Pacific and the Middle East to Africa, alongside that steady growth in the big established markets like North America and Europe.
Yeah, that's a good summary.
So now let's pivot to the why. What forces does the source actually identify as, driving this consistent upward trend?
Well, the report really points to three main factors. First, and maybe the most obvious link for an expectorant,
Yeah.
is the increase in respiratory illnesses globally.
Right. That makes sense. More people with coughs, colds, that sort of thing. Naturally, that would increase demand for medicines containing this ingredient.
Precisely. The second key driver mentioned is greater demand for over-the-counter or OTC medications.
Ah, the stuff you can buy without a prescription.
Exactly. And this trend suggests, a growing consumer preference for self-treating common ailments. Maybe it's convenience, cost, maybe just better accessibility in some regions.
Okay, and the third factor?
The third one highlighted is pharmaceutical advancements, especially across emerging economies.
And that doesn't just mean new fancy drugs.
No, not necessarily. It's also about advancements in local production capabilities, better distribution networks, regulatory frameworks evolving, all the things that make it easier for basic pharmaceutical ingredients and the final products to actually reach more people.
Okay, so when you put those three together, increasing respiratory problems, people reaching more for accessible OTC solutions, and the basic pharma infrastructure growing in developing markets.
Yeah, it paints a pretty clear picture of that vibrant growth story the report talks about.
And the data we just went through seems to really reflect that, doesn't it? Like the high growth in India, Egypt, Turkey, that could be strongly influenced by that third point about advancements in emerging economies, plus the OTC trend.
I think that's a very plausible connection, yeah. Those factors likely work together.
So, okay, we've done this deep dive into Guaifenesin powder. What does this really mean for you, the listener? Why spend time thinking about this, one specific ingredient?
Well, tracking a market like this, it's not just about a single chemical compound, is it? It actually offers a surprising window into, well, broader global trends.
How so?
It gives you insight into how prevalent respiratory health issues might be becoming, or at least how they're being treated. It shows how consumer behavior might be shifting towards self-care.
Right, with common medicines.
Exactly. And it sheds light on how the whole global pharmaceutical supply chain functions right down to these core ingredients.
Yeah, it really does underscore how these seemingly small components, they play absolutely critical roles in what's ultimately a multi-billion-dollar global industry.
Hmm.
And that industry is directly linked to global health patterns, economic development.
Mm-hmm.
It shows you that complex interplay between public health needs and, well, market dynamics.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder that these market reports, they aren't just dry numbers. They're often reflections of very real, very human needs and capabilities, just on a global scale.
Okay, so to kind of wrap things up here, this deep dive, which was powered by the data from cognitive market research, it reveals this global market for Guaifenesin powder that's not just large, but it's seeing significant, consistent growth, poised to nearly double by 2033.
Yeah, quite the trajectory.
And this growth, it isn't random. It seems to be a direct outcome of factors like rising respiratory illnesses, that increasing demand for accessible OTC treatments, and the expanding pharmaceutical landscape, especially in emerging economies.
It's a pretty clear example of a global market responding quite dynamically to fundamental health needs and, evolving economic conditions around the world.
So, given this strong predicted growth, based on things like respiratory illnesses and OTC demand, here's something maybe to mull over. Looking ahead, does this kind of market trend suggest we're likely to see a future with just more respiratory illness globally driving that demand? Or does it maybe primarily indicate better access to affordable, basic treatments for those illnesses across more of the world's population? What broader trends might this imply about public health infrastructure, about access over the next decade? It's a fascinating question to consider, I think.
Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to our deep dive. We're taking that source material you sent over and really try and get to the heart of it.
Right. Today, it's that cognitive market research report. We're looking at the global market for guaifenesin powder.
Yeah, guaifenesin, you probably know it's like super common in cough and cold medicine.
It helps break up
Congestion.
exactly that. It's a go-to for respiratory relief. But what kind of jumps out from this report is just how big the market for the raw powder is and how much it's set to grow.
Okay, hit me with the numbers.
So the source pegs it at $2.15 billion back in 2021.
Wow, okay. 2.15 billion just for the powder? That's pretty impressive.
And it doesn't stop there. The projection is $2.68 billion by 2025.
Okay.
And then looking further out, they think it could reach $4.18 billion by 2033.
4.18 billion. Okay, so this isn't just steady growth. This is a market really taking off for an ingredient maybe we don't think about much.
Definitely on an upward path.
So what's fueling this? What does the report say is driving this kind of expansion?
Well, connecting it to the bigger health picture, a main driver is just the increase in respiratory problems around the world.
Like what specifically?
More chronic bronchitis, asthma cases, acute infections, that sort of thing.
And the source links that to things like air pollution getting worse, smoking still being a factor globally, populations getting older, more allergens. Is that right?
That's exactly it. So logically, more people needing relief means more demand for ingredients like guaifenesin.
Okay, makes sense. What else?
Another big one the report highlights is the real surge in using over-the-counter meds.
Ah, right. People self-treating more.
Yeah, consumers seem more proactive, more informed maybe, and just more comfortable self-medicating for common stuff. Guaifenesin is seen as, established, effective.
So it benefits directly. You feel a cough coming, you look for something trusted you can just grab.
Pretty much.
Does the report mention where this OTC trend is having the biggest impact, like geographically?
It does point to emerging markets playing a pretty significant role as healthcare access gets better there and incomes rise.
People can buy more affordable meds like these.
Exactly. Higher consumption of accessible drugs, including ones with guaifenesin.
So it's a mix of rising health issues and these shifts in consumer behavior and access.
But okay, even with this growth, there have to be challenges, right? What does the report flag as restraints?
Yeah, good question. It brings up the complexity of the pharma world.
Hmm.
Regulatory requirements are listed as a big challenge.
Like getting approvals.
Right. Different countries have different standards. The approval process can be long, costly.
Yeah.
It can definitely slow things down, put the brakes on a bit.
Those necessary hurdles. Safety first, but
Yeah.
complex. What other limiting factors?
The source also mentions potential side effects, nausea, dizziness for some people, which might limit how much they use or if they use it at all.
Okay.
And interestingly, it points to growing competition from alternative therapies.
Oh, like herbal stuff. Yeah. Herbal remedies, traditional medicine, homeopathic options. Some consumers are looking for things they see as more, quote, natural.
Huh. That's interesting. A
Yeah.
booming market for a standard ingredient, but also a rise in alternatives at the same time. It's a dynamic picture.
It really is.
So beyond just getting bigger and facing challenges, how else is this market evolving? Any key trends shaping its future according to the report?
Yeah, it highlights a growing demand for high-purity guaifenesin powder. We're talking like over 99% pure.
Why the focus on purity?
It's crucial for meeting really strict pharmaceutical quality standards, especially as regulations get tighter everywhere. It's about the quality of the basic ingredient.
Right, better building blocks for the final medicines. What about innovation on the product side?
Absolutely. The industry is definitely pushing for better ways to deliver guaifenesin. The report mentions things like controlled release tablets.
So longer-lasting relief.
Yeah, or combination products. Guaifenesin paired with other ingredients to tackle multiple symptoms at once. It's all about making it work better and just being more convenient for people.
Making it easier to take, more effective. Got it.
Exactly. And one more thing, sustainability. It's mentioned as an increasing trend, with manufacturers looking into more eco-friendly ways to actually produce the powder.
Okay, so this deep dive into your source, this cognitive market research report, it really paints a picture, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
A global Guaifenesin powder market that's already big and set to grow quite significantly over the next decade or so.
Fueled by these undeniable health trends globally and shifts in how people buy and use medicines.
But on the flip side, it's navigating real challenges,
Mm.
regulations, competition from alternatives.
While also evolving, pushing for higher purity, better drug formulations, and even greener production.
We've really tried to just boil down the key takeaways presented in the source material you sent us here, give you the essence of this market view.
Yeah, a focused look based on that specific report.
Right. So here's something maybe to think about after this discussion. We see this strong growth forecast for a very specific conventional drug ingredient, high-purity guaifenesin. This is happening even while both standard OTC drugs and alternative therapies are also gaining ground. So what might this specific trend tell you about how people globally are really prioritizing and managing their health day to day? And, how might that whole dynamic keep shifting?